we will be moving ahead and we will be covering the next method, that is copy method. So how can we copy a list? If we want to make a copy of the list that we have, we can simply use the copy method, this method, to create a copy of the list. So to do this, you just have to create another list, or you need to create another variable. So I will create another list, that is copied list, and I will assign it the value of marks, and I will then be using the copy method on marks so that a copy of marks is generated, and I can simply print the copied list, and you can see that this copied list has been successfully printed on my terminal. You might be wondering that how this copy method is different from this approach. So if I want to print this copied list now, you will see that both of the output are actually same. So what is the benefit of using this method? Instead, we can directly use this approach. So the reason is, in this case, a new copy of this marks is not created, and simply the old list is actually assigned to this copied list as a whole. So what do I mean? I do mean is that you can understand it like this. Uh, you can think of this as an object which is already stored in the memory when we assigned it to marks. Now, what is happening is, when we are using this approach, there is no new object being created in the memory. Instead, this copy.list is actually pointing to the same object in the memory. That is, in this case, this marks and this copied list is pointing to the same object in the memory. They are pointing to the same object. Now, if I decided to change something in this list, that is this original list, then you will see that this copied list has also changed. You can see that this copied list has also changed. And if I try to assign something to the marks, if I want to append something to the list, like I want to append 89. So, but for this you should know how append works. Mm, so let me just beforehand tell you how append works, and then we will be coming again copy method. So let me just do it above this copy method so that you don't have any confusion when you are reading this code. So we will be using the append method. So append method in a list is used to add an entry at the last index of an list. I should not say the last index, I should say that it will actually add a new element behind the last existing element in the list, and it will increase the number of indices by 1 each time we append an element using the append method. So let us do it by an example. So I want to actually add a new student to the list, but the catch is I cannot do it by this method. That is, I cannot use a separator and then add something to the next iteration. But what do I mean is, I don't want to modify the list inside the square braces. Or you may think it like I don't have the privileges to modify this list directly. So in that case, I will be using the marks.append method, and I will simply add the I will simply write the marks that I want to add after this last iteration, and Python will simply add those marks at the last place, that is after this 89. And Here you can see the live running example too. When I'm going to print this marks list now, you will see that 67 has been successfully printed on the terminal. So now we know that how append works. We can actually come back to how copy method works and how it differs from this. So you might be wondering that was only this much to be covered in the append section. So the answer is yes. Only this much part was to be covered by me in the append method, and there is nothing else that I think you should as a beginner know about this append method. So let us come back to the copy method. Now, if I am going to modify this list, that is marks dot append, I want to append 67. Now if I write like marks dot append 67 after I have already created a reference of this copied list, what will happen? What do you see? We have seen that 67 has now appeared in this list after 45, but we actually made changes to the marks list and we are now printing the copied list. So why is this actually happening? So this is the reason why I told you that this copied list is actually referring to the same object in the memory that the marks is actually referring to. So this both of them, these variables are referring to the same object. Python did not allocate any memory, that is, it did not create any new object for this copied list. It simply assigned another reference for this list object. By the way, I'm calling this object because everything in Python is an object, and if you have any doubt regarding this statement, you are free to Google it out. I hope I have illustrated you how this works, but what if I used a copy method instead of using that previous approach? What would have happened? Now you will see that 67 is not there in the copied list because now Python has actually created a copy of this object and that copy is assigned to this copied list. Yes, that copy is assigned to this copied list after the copy is created, and both of these lists are different. That is, they are not now referring to the same object in the memory. This explanation might be a little bit confusing for you. Till now, I have covered a lot of things, but one thing that actually slipped off my mind is what will happen if we went or we tried to access something that is not in this list. That is, what if something I want to access that is out of the indices value in the list? What will happen? So in that case, we will get an index error, and I did not cover this topic initially, so I thought to cover it now. What would had have happened if I tried to print the marks at the seventh index? At the seventh index, what will happen? Let me just comment this out. What will happen if I try to access a value which is actually outside the number of indices present in the list? So it will simply give me an index error saying that list index out of range. Now that we have covered another error, we will be now moving ahead. This was a very small part that I missed, so I decided to put it over here. And now that we have also seen the copy method, now we will be moving on to the next method, that is reverse method. So if I want to reverse a list, how can I do that? So the answer is we can use simply a reverse method. So let me copy the list again, and now when I'm going to reverse this list using the reverse method, and when I'm going to print the list marks, you will see that this value will appear on the first index, this will on the second index, this will be appearing on the third, and this will be appearing on the fourth, and similarly this will be shifted to the last indexes. Let me just run the program. So you can see that 100, which was initially at the 0th index, has now come to the last index. 90, which was at the second index, has now been shifted to the last second index, and similarly the other components of the list have been shifted to other places as well. So that now we have covered the reverse method too. We will now be coming to the remove method. Now do you remember that we used to remove the element using the pop method and then simply assigning the pop method a value of that particular index at which we want to remove the item from the list. So the remove method actually solves a problem. That is, what if the list is too much long and we don't know what is the index value of a particular element? So in that case, we use the remove method. In this remove method, we will simply enter the element that we want to remove. For example, I want to remove 78 from this list. And when I'm going to print this list that is marked, you will see that 78 is not printed on the terminal. So you can see that 78 is present in the list but not printed on the terminal. So this is how remove method works. And some of you might be wondering that if it also returns the value of the, or I should say it, if this remove method also returns something. So let me just show you over here. It returns nothing. Yes, it returns nothing, unlike the pop method, which returns the value of that removed element. So this is how the remove method works. And what makes it different from the pop method is that in pop method, you can see it over here. We used to enter the value of index that we want to remove, and in this case we simply enter the value that we want to remove. Now one more thing that you need to notice is that what if there are multiple 78s, that is if a value is repeating, what will happen in that case? So let us run this piece of code too. You will see that only the first occurrence will be removed and the second occurrence will actually not be touched. So what will it do? It will simply start transversing through whole of this list, and wherever it finds the first 78, it will simply remove that, and after that it will not transverse the string any further. So this is all about remove method. Now assume that I have to actually insert a value at a particular index. I have to insert a value at a particular index. So the case is I cannot access the list directly and I cannot directly modify the list. So what will I do? If I'm going to use the append method, I can only append an item at the very last index of this list. But I want to add an element at the second index of the list, and I want this 34 to be shifted a position behind. That is, I want this 34 to come over here in place of 45, and similarly 45 will get shifted back and 89 will have a new index. So to do this, we actually have a insert method. So if we will use the insert method, we can insert a value at a particular index. We can see that it accepts two attributes, and I should say two values for now. That is, first of all, it will be asking for the index at which you want to place. Remember that do not enter an index that goes out of bounds of this current list. That is, if I try to enter 8, that is not possible for this list, and then try to enter another entry at this particular index and simply try to print the marks list, you will see that it has done that at a at the very last index. That is, it instead of giving an error, it has actually added that element to the very last position in this list, that is behind the last element. And if you might be wondering that that was a coincidence, you can see that I have actually increased the value of index to a very large number, which is not possible for this list. As of now, you can see which is not possible for this list. And I try to insert a value into it, and you can see that instead of giving me error, it simply added that particular value at the end of that list. That is, it worked similar to append method. What if now actually want to place it at the second index? So I will simply write second over here and clear the terminal once again, and at the very second index this value 79 has been added. So this was all about insert method, and now we will be moving to the next method, which is extend method. Extend method. Now this method might bother some of you because the syntax is quite unusual for you guys, because up to now you have seen we are operating only on a single list, and we are either removing some element from the list, or we are adding some element to the list, or something like that. But now what we are going to do is we are actually going to combine two lists. Yes, we are going to combine two lists using a method, and that method is extend method. So what if I wanted to add another list at the end of this list? You can think it of like there are two teachers who teach two different sections in the same school, and they have to submit a final report which contains all the marks of each and every student of their respective subject. So what will they do? Instead of submitting two different reports, they will simply attach both of their reports in a single file. That is, they will actually combine their reports and submit. So in the same manner, if I had a marks 2 from a second teacher, and it contains some values like 54, 32, 23, 32, 78, 78, 100, and 100. Now I want to extend the marks list and add the elements of this second marks list to the last of this marks list. I will simply use the extend method. That is, I will use marks.extend, and inside this I will provide this list. I can directly enter this list like this, or either I can use this approach too. That is marks 2. Both of these methods are correct. You can implement them by your own, but I will be simply implementing this method only. I forgot to write the print statement, so when I'm going to print the marks, you will see that a longer list will appear, which was initially up to here only, and that list has now been extended with 6 elements which were there present in the marks 2 list. So this is how the extend method works. So we have discussed some of methods in the list part, and I would surely encourage you to discover some more methods and comment them down in the comment section if you are really serious regarding your Python journey. So we have covered a very handsome part on lists, and we are actually ready to move to the second portion, that is tuples. So I hope by this time you would be knowing that lists are mutable, that is they can be modified. I already showed you that how lists can be modified because we can actually have different methods to alter the data. We can sort a list, we can clear the elements inside a list, we can remove elements inside the list. So list is modifiable. Now comes the second collection, that is tuple. So we'll be creating a new file, that is tuple, inside this folder, that is tuple dot c py. So we have created another file, that is tuple. And what are tuples? Now tuples are an immutable type of collection in Python, and these are actually used to store multiple values like lists. But you might be wondering that what is the need of tuples if you already have lists? So the answer is, what if there is some confidential data that you have stored into a list? Can you think of it? Anyone outside the organization can actually modify that list if he got an access to the system. Yes, he can modify that. But if you don't want the items that you store in a collection to be modified, in that case we use tuples. So I hope by this example you are certainly clear with tuples, that why do we need them. And they are actually ordered, that is, once you have given them a particular order, you actually cannot modify that order too. So actually lists are also ordered, but you can actually sort them and insert different values and change the values of particular index, but inside tuples you cannot do that. And tuples also allow duplicate values like lists. This was all the basic introduction about tuples that I could give you. Now let us try to create a tuple. Create a variable, and now we will create a tuple, and inside this tuple we will simply be storing, suppose I have stored my name and I have stored my marks of the current semester, and suppose I am also storing my phone number inside this tuple, and I don't want anyone to be able to modify this tuple. So how can I do that? So I don't want anyone, and I don't want anyone to be able to modify this data. But anyone can actually, what is my name, what is my current CGPA, and what is my phone number. So I want that anyone should be able to access this data, but not modify it. So in that case, I will simply use tuples, as I've already told you where tuples are used. So now how can we print the items inside a tuple? So you can see that this tuple has been printed on the screen, and you can actually use a for loop too to print the item in a tuple. You will now see that each and every item in this tuple is printed in a new line. So now we know that how we can print data of a tuple, how we can iterate through a tuple. So now we will check if we can actually modify any value in the tuple. That is, if we can modify value at a particular index in the tuple. So this will prove you that the tuple value is not modifiable. suppose that somebody who is with a crooked mind tried to modify this tuple and change my name as ABC, and then he tried to print this tuple. So Python will simply give him an error and it will say that tuple does not support item assignment. So it says that you can actually not modify a tuple and you cannot assign a new value to the tuple. So in this way, the data will remain in safe hands. So this was about tuple and some practical illustrations on tuple. Now we will see some method on tuple. So we will be covering only two methods inside tuple, and one of them is this, that is count method. Now if I want to count how many times this 9.54 comes into my private tuple, that is my private data, I can simply use the count method. It will return the number of occurrences of a value, that in this case is 9.54. So you can see that 9.54 is 3 times there in the private data tuple, and the same is indicated in this terminal. The second method is index method. So if you want to know that what is the particular index of a particular value, that is, I want to know the very first index at which this 9.54 appears, in that case I will simply use the index method. Remember that index method will return me only first the very first occurrence of this iteration. So it says, let me just clear it and rerun it so that you can see only one value, that is 1. You can see that this value 9.54 appears on the first index in the tuple. And for your knowledge, let me just tell you that indexing works the same way in tuples too. And this time I won't be discussing the same concept because it will only increase the length of this video. So this was all about tuples. There are various other things that you can do with tuple, like you can join two tuple, you can loop through tuples that I've already told you, and there are a few tuple questions that you will find, like if you could update a tuple or not, and some advanced topics will also be there on the internet, but don't bother about those. Now that we have covered tuples, now we will be moving to the next point, that is set. Now set, I hope you would have already read in your class 11th if you were a student of mathematics in your senior secondary schools or at your college. So let us now move to sets. So like lists, sets are also used to store multiple items in a single variable, and it is one of the four built-in data types in Python, and it is actually used to collect data. And the other three, those are list, tuple, and dictionary, all with different qualities and usage. So a set is actually a collection of data, and it keeps the data unordered and unchangeable and unindexed. Yes, you heard me right. Indexing does not exist for set. And one other point that you also need to note is that set items are not changeable, but you can remove and add new items to the set. That is, if I entered I say a number in that set, I cannot simply use index because indexes don't exist in set to modify the value at particular index. so I cannot actually modify that value, but I can remove that value and I can add new value. So how to create a set? So to create a set, the syntax is quite simple. I will use my set, and to create a set we generally use curly braces, and if there are nothing inside these curly braces, we simply know that this is an empty set. But here is a catch. In set, we actually cannot create an empty set like this. If I want to create an empty set like this and run it, let me just introduce you to another, I should say, function available in Python, which I think I've already covered it up in the data type section, where we used to check the data type of integer, boolean, float, complex, etc., etc. So we can use that type function to also check the type of the data structure or the collection. Suppose I want to check what is the data type of this my set variable. If I'm going to check the type, you will not see the type to be set. It simply says that the class is dictionary, not set. So why did this happen? I think it should not be covered now because this is a beginner's course. So I will surely be covering it if I made some intermediate or some advanced course in Python. But for now, let us know how we can create an empty set. So to create an empty set, you just use this approach. That is, you have to tell the interpreter that this is a set. So you have to tell the interpreter that this is a set and it is not containing any value. That is, it is an empty set. Now if I'm going to type, if I'm going to check the type of my set and print that type on the terminal, you will see that the type is now set, which was initially dictionary. So we now know how to create an empty set, how to check the type if we are actually having a set or it is a dictionary. Now we will be moving how can we assign values to a set. So to assign a value to a set, you simply use this approach. And remember that a set cannot contain duplicate value. And even if you try to enter duplicate value, a set will actually remove that duplicate value on its own. And you won't be able to see this duplicate value when you're going to print the result. For now, you can see that I have entered 56 two times and 92 times in this set. And to prove that sets actually don't contain repeated values, I will print this set, and you will see that this 56 is printed only once, then this 90 is also printed only once, and all those left elements are printed later in the section, and those two are also printed once. So what is happening in this case is that this set is written in such a way by the developers that it automatically removes the duplicate elements. And since I already told you that a set is unordered, you can see that I entered the element 90 at the very end of this set. But in this case, when you are printing it on the terminal, you can see that it appears on the second index, not on the last index. Although indexing does not exist in sets, I am using the word index to just explain the positioning of element in sets. Let me just write it over here also, that there is no concept of indexing in sets. like sets in mathematics, you can actually perform various mathematical operations that you operate over sets. Those are set union, difference, intersection, and others like inner join, outer join, left join. You can do all of those in Python too, but we will not be actually covering all those points. We will be covering only a few points, but I have told you that we can do all those operations to just make you aware so that you can by yourself explore those methods and look for them. We have seen that what are sets, and we already have gone through a basic introduction with what sets are. We are now ready to move to the next topic or the next point, that is methods with sets. So there are the various number of methods that you can use with sets, and I have already listed some of them over here, and you can use this text file as a reference for your convenience, but I will not be covering each and every method that you can see on the screen, and the reason is because there are a few mathematical points that you should know before you actually start to learn these some of the methods like intersection, union, symmetric difference, and some others too. So, and if I started to teach you all these topics, then this video will become very long, and it will not be good for this Python course, because this is a Python course, not any mathematics course that I would teach you what is a set, difference, what is intersection, what is union. So I would actually skip teaching of these points, and but we will be covering those points which we will actually be able to cover without having any prior knowledge on operations with sets. So let's begin. So the first method that we are going to see is clear method. So the first method which we are going to see is clear method. It works the same way that it worked in the list, and we can see it now also. My set dot clear, and when I'm going to print my set, you will see that you will see that there it just prints that this my set is actually an empty set, and empty set is by default denoted by this set and then parenthesis and terminal, and also in this Python interpreter, as we have already covered that, because empty curly braces denote dictionary. So we have another denotation for sets that those are empty, and that is this. So this is how clearing a set works. Now we will be working with adding an element to the set. Since a set is actually a unordered data type, that is, the elements inside this data type are unordered, we don't know that at what position this new value would be added using the add function. So if I'm going to use my set dot add, and I will be adding this 78 to the, oh, 78 actually exists, so we will be adding 85 to this previously existing set. Yeah, we will actually see that my set now contains the value 85, and the 85 is placed at the very first place. I'm not using the term index because there is no indexing in set, which we have already covered that there is no indexing in set, as we have now covered the method add, we will now method move to the next method, that is copy. So copy works the way similar to the way it worked with list. We just have to create a new set, that is my set 2, or let me make it that set dot copy, so that it still remains a good practice in programming. So I want to make a copy of this my set and assign all the objects that this set has in it to this set copy. So I will be using this way. And what if we went through this approach is already explained to you in the list section, and if you have not seen that part, I think you should have a look at it, because that part is very very interesting and many of the beginners don't know that what is the difference between this and this method. So when I'm going to print this set dot cop this set underscore copy, you will actually see that a copy of the existing set, that is my set, has been printed on the terminal. And this is how the copy method works. The next method, that is difference, we will skip it. We will be skipping this too. We will be covering discard. So if we want to remove any item from a set, we will simply use discard method. That is, if I want to remove the element, let me just copy it so that if you need the code, you already have it. So if I want to remove a particular element from this set, I will simply use my set dot discard and then simply remove that element from set. If it is a member, it says, the VS Code suggestion says, and it says, unlike the set dot remove, the discard method does not raise an exception when element is missing from the set. So what does this line mean? So I will cover this line, the meaning of this line, once I actually cover the remove method also. So if I try to remove the element 56, I can simply do it by this method. And when I'm going to print this my set, you will see that 56 has been successfully removed from the set. Now what if I enter such an element that is not there in this my set? What will happen? Then in that case, nothing will be removed from the set and we won't actually have any kind of error. But here is another method, that is remove method. This method also removes the element from a set, but if it finds, the remove method finds that the element that we have entered in this parenthesis actually does not exist in this set, that is, it doesn't exist in this set, then we then the remove method will simply give you an error. So let me first run it simply without any case of error. Like if I want to remove 45 and I want to print the set my set, you will see that it will simply remove the element 45 and it will not give me any kind of error. But what if I actually enter the element which is not there in this set? Then you will simply see that it gives me a key error. So it says that the key which you are trying to remove from this set is actually non-existent. But what was the case when we used discard method? You can see that this key 5 is not there in this set 2, And when we are going to run both of these piece of codes together, you will see that in first case, when we use discard 5, the set was returned successfully without any error. But for the second time, when we tried to print the my set after using the remove method, it gives us an error. So this was the basic difference between two methods of actually getting rid of an element from a set. Those are those methods are remove and discard. And I hope that you would surely have observed one more thing in this discard method. Let me just show you once again so that you don't feel like magic. Now I want to remove 45. So will it be able to remove all the duplicates of 45, or will it be just removing the first occurrence only? So let's check. You can see that it has removed all the entries which were 45 in this set. It doesn't matter if they occur together or if they occur randomly. You can see that I have actually entered another 45 in this set at the last position, and there are two 45s which are occurring in a continuous manner in the set. And when I try to discard this element 45, it will return me a set which will not have 45 in it at all. This means that this discard method will actually remove all the copies of the element that you are trying to remove using this discard method. So does the same happen when we are using the remove method? So let's check it. We will again be using the same set, that is, we will modify the set in the same manner, and now we will be removing the element 45. Again, you will see that all of the 45s have been removed from the set. And the reason why is this happening is because we actually cannot keep duplicates in the set. So in case of list, if you try to remove a particular element which has which is already having multiple entries in the list, then you will see that only first occurrence will be removed, because list can allow multiple copies of the same element, but sets actually don't allow multiple copies of the same element. So you might be able to say this 45 three times, but internally this 45 is actually stored only one time in this set. And when we remove that 45, you will see that the single occurrence of the 45 will actually be removed. Since there is no 45 in the set, because set keeps only single 45, so the output that we will be get will actually not contain 45 even a single time. So this is how set works, quite different from other data types, those were tuples and lists. Now that we have covered discard and remove method 2, we will be covering the pop method, and finally this will be the last method that we will be covering. And I have a homework for you. I want you guys to go and actually check how all the other different methods of this set difference, union, intersection, is subset or is superset and others work. I have already placed all these methods into a setmethods.txt file for you guys, so that you can take reference from this file and search for them. Now the last method that we were about to cover is pop method. Now, unlike lists, pop method actually works quite differently in case of sets. And the different part is only that part in which list used a index inside this parenthesis to remove a particular element using the pop method. But in this case, since sets don't have indexing, we can actually not place any value inside this pop method. And if we try to do so, the interpreter will surely be giving us an error, shouting at us that what are you doing? This is not actually allowed. Let me just copy these elements. I will remove the duplicates. And now if I want to pop an element, that is, I want to use my set dot pop, and I try to enter an integer, either you will see an error or you will see a blank screen. Let's see what the terminal shows us. So you can see that I already said it will show us an error because set.pop take no arguments but one was given. This was what I was trying to explain you. But now if I'm going to run this, you will see that a random element will be popped out from this set. It is not necessary that every time the last element would be removed because there is no indexing. So pop would actually remove any random element from the set. You can see that this case in this time 90 was removed. But if I try to run this piece of code again after some time, you can see again 90 is removed. But this is not going to happen in every case because sets are not indexed. In this case, luckily 90 is removed every time, but it will not happen every time because sets are unordered. And please remember this point, this will not happen every time. So we have now covered almost everything that I wanted us to cover, and this was all on sets from my side. And finally we will now be moving to the next and the final data structure or collection, that is dictionary. So I've created a new file, that is dictionary.py, and we will now be beginning with dictionaries. So I hope that you guys would surely have used dictionaries in your real life. You would have most probably looked for an eh, Hindi to English dictionary or English to Hindi dictionary or any other dictionary that you have used most probably for your local languages. But the point is that dictionary in Python are quite similar to the dictionary that you use, and they are similar. By saying this I mean that, like dictionaries of real world where you have a word and then you have the meaning for that word, in the same manner in Python we have keys in place of words, and in place of meanings we actually have the value that we want to set for that key. So in real world, dictionary are actually a collection of word and meanings, and in Pythonic world or the programming world of Python, dictionaries are actually a collection of key value pairs. So let me write it down over here. Real world dictionary, and it is Pythonic dictionary. So I hope you now know the relation between the real world dictionary and Pythonic dictionary, as well as the difference between both of them. So how do we actually create a dictionary, or what is the syntax for creating a dictionary? So the syntax is quite simple. I can create it like my dict and simple. This is actually a empty, simple empty dictionary. Now I have already proved you that this is a dictionary and not an empty set. You can verify it by using the type function that is already provided by Python to check the type of the data type. Now there is another way too that you can use to create an empty dictionary, and it is this method. And there are other ways too, but I want you to explore those other ways by yourself. So how do we actually store values in dictionary? So now that we are having a basic idea about dictionary, we will now be creating a dictionary with some key value pairs. Uh, for example, I want to create a key that is my name. That is, I want to create a key name, and I want to assign the key a value that is Vishesh. So the syntax to do is to do that is this. And inside dictionaries, we generally don't create very confusing or irrelevant key value pairs so that it becomes very hectic for the person who is accessing those key value pairs to actually relate them and get the answer that he wants. That is, we should never actually create a key that is having that is actually a name, and we should never assign it a value like 123. That is a bad practice in programming, and this practice should be avoided. Now if I want to store my roll number, and let me just write down a random number. So to separate these two key value pairs, we use a colon. To separate the key value pairs, we use a colon. And to separate different key value pairs, that is, if we want to separate a key from its value pair, then we use a colon. And if we want to separate this whole key value pair from other key value pair, then we use the separator, that is a comma. So let us create some more, like section. So my section is, let us call it E section. And now if I want to tell my CGPA for TGPA, then it is 9.54. And if I want to store my favorite number, then I can store my favorite number too. That is, so you might be wondering that who actually have a favorite number as a complex number. But I just wrote this complex number just to explain you guys that it can actually have anything, any kind of data type. It is not necessary that you will always have strings, integers, and floats. You can also have complex, and you can also have a boolean value. Like if I want to represent that whether I have passed or not in the semester, I will use a boolean value, that is true for pass and for false for failing. So this is how I have created a key value pair, and I have stored different values for different keys. And let me just make the program more readable. You can also see that I have actually used different string quotations for actually representing my keys. And I just want to you to just take a look and just have a quick revision of the different quotations that we can use to declare a string. And this was only the purpose. As it served the purpose, I will simply remove them. Now I want to actually print this dictionary. First of all, how can I do that? And the way is quite simple. You just simply use print function, and then you just have to do this, and you will see a dictionary that is already printed with all its key value pairs. You can see name, issue, roll number 39, section 8. You can see the TGPA. You can see the favorite number. You can see that if the student has passed or not. So now we have seen that how we can use the print function to print a dictionary. We are now ready to move on to the next top point, that is how we can iterate a dictionary using for loop. But before I tell you how we can iterate through dictionary using a for loop, I would want you guys to try doing this by yourself. That is, write a for loop and try to iterate through this dictionary with the help of that for loop, and just give me a code that you have actually written the very first time when you try to print it using the for loop, and I will surely appreciate you. Now that I hope you would have surely tried by yourself that how you can use a for loop to iterate through the dictionary, I will be guiding you how you can actually do it. But before you know how you will be iterating through dictionary using a for loop, let me just illustrate you through a wrong method, a wrong approach that people generally use. That is for key value pair in my dict print key comma val. Now this is a journal mistake that people who code out trying to iterate through this dictionary for the very first time, they make such kind of mistakes. And when I'm going to run this, you will see an error. It says value error, and it says too many values to unpack. And it says that these too many values are expected to be 2 in number. So it will directly give an error. So it will give an error if we try to actually use this approach. So instead of going by this method, we have a different approach for doing this. Let me just write down over here that this is not the way to do it. And but before we move on how we can actually iterate over a dictionary using for loop, we should know about a method that is dot items. Now, what this dot item method does is it will simply create a list, and then inside that list it will create a tuple, and inside that tuple it will store the first key value pair, and then it will create a new tuple inside this list, and then it will store the second value, that is roll number 39, and then so on up to the last key and the last value. So this, let me just explain it again. So this method dot items will simply fetch each and every key value pair and put it inside a tuple, and it will do this fetching and then keeping it inside this tuple for each and every key value pair, and then simply it will place those collections of tuple into a list. And this is how this method dot items actually unpack this dictionary into a collection of tuples. So let us now try iterating over the dictionary using this new approach. That is, we will iterate not through the dictionary directly, but we will actually unpack this dictionary into this list, and then we will be iterating through the list items, that is those tuples, and inside those tuple we will have key and value pair. So this key and value pairs will actually be referred by these two variables. That is, these two variables, key and value, will refer to the key and value stored inside this tuple. And then these key value pairs can be simply printed using the print function. Don't worry, I will be giving you explanation for this topic one more time after we run this code, and you can now see that we have actually printed the values of dictionary. It is quite less readable, so I will just use the strings to format our output, and here we go. Now you can see that each and every key and its corresponding value has been printed on the terminal successfully, and this we do it by using the items dot items method. Now what I wanted to explain is that this dot items method actually unpacks the dictionary into a list of tuples, and those list of tuples actually contain key value pairs. That is, the tuples inside the list will actually contain the key and the value pair, and such tuples will be n in number, and in this case n refers to the number of key value pairs in the dictionary that you have choose to unpack using the dot items method. Then we will simply use a for loop on this list of tuples to iterate over it. Now, instead of iterating over a single object, that is a single tuple, we will actually iterate over the items stored inside the tuple, and that we do using this key and value variable. We declare this key and value variable in the for loop, and these two variables will correspondingly fetch the value of the value, sorry, the key and the value together. That is, this key variable will fetch the value of this variable which actually stores the key of the first very item in the dictionary, and this value will actually be storing the value of the very first item in the dictionary corresponding to the very first key of that dictionary. And in this manner they will fetch the key value pair simultaneously, and we will be able to print them one by one in order that we have actually given in this dictionary. So yes, you heard me right. Dictionaries are ordered and indexed as well, and they are also mutable. That is, you can actually access the value and even modify the value of of a particular key that you want to. Now that we have covered the items method, and we actually have also covered how we can iterate a dictionary using the for loop, we can now move to the next point,